Welcome back, everyone. Ready to dive into some more fascinating material with me today?
Always up for a good deep dive.
Well, get ready because this one is all about mindfulness and meditation. And
Oh, interesting.
yeah, it's based on like this text that's packed with practical techniques, almost like a training manual for your mind.
I like that. A training manual.
Yeah, so think of this deep dive as like our training session.
I'm ready to get in shape mentally.
Me too. And a great place to start is with something called the 5 Precepts.
Okay, I'm familiar with those.
Yeah. So these are basically like commitments, promises you make to yourself to steer clear of actions that can really mess with your inner peace and even cause chaos out in the world.
Right. It's not about some external authority laying down the law. It's more about setting up guidelines for yourself, like a personal code of conduct.
Exactly. And the first one is no killing. Pretty straightforward, right? But it goes beyond just like not harming other people.
It does. We're talking about a deep respect for all forms of life, recognizing that interconnectedness of everything.
Yeah. And even, those seemingly insignificant acts of harm. I mean, they can ripple outwards and create disharmony.
For sure. It's like a domino effect.
Okay, so the second precept is no stealing. Now, you might think, well, I'm an honest person, I don't steal. But this precept digs a little deeper.
Yeah, it's about respecting boundaries, right? Not just taking physical objects, but maybe even someone's time or energy.
Well, that's interesting. You mean like distracting someone unnecessarily? Or maybe even like stealing their peace of mind with gossip or negativity?
Exactly. Those things can be just as harmful as taking a physical object.
Okay, the third precept is no harmful sexual conduct. So this is about being aware of how our actions impact others, especially in such a sensitive area. Respecting relationships and understanding that potential for harm.
And this precept often gets interpreted in different ways depending on cultural contexts and belief systems. But at its core, it's about recognizing the power of this aspect of human experience and making sure our actions are guided by respect and understanding.
And consent, of course.
Of course.
All right, moving on to precept number 4, no lying. Seems simple enough, but again, this goes way beyond just avoiding outright lies, right? It's about being truthful with yourself, with others.
Yep.
It's about cultivating honesty in all aspects of your life.
It's like a commitment to authenticity. Every time we're dishonest, even in a small way, it creates this little crack in our integrity.
Right. Okay, and finally, the 5th precept, no intoxicants. This one is about avoiding anything that clouds your mind, hinders your judgment, and could lead to harmful behavior. Substances that essentially hold you back from making clear and skillful choices.
And I know this one sometimes causes a bit of debate. Some people might argue that certain substances used in like specific rituals or cultural contexts could be an exception to the rule.
That's true. There are always nuances to consider. Yeah. But I think the main principle here is about being in control of your mental state, right?
Yeah.
Choosing clarity over escapism.
Absolutely. It's about taking responsibility for your own mind.
Okay, so we've got these 5 precepts laid out. They might seem pretty basic at first glance.
Yeah.
But the text dives into some really cool benefits that come with actually living by them, truly integrating them into your life.
It's like they become the bedrock for a more harmonious way of being in the world, both internally and externally.
Yeah. It even mentions that by living in accordance with these precepts, you gain the respect of like those who've achieved a higher level of awareness or enlightenment.
That's fascinating, isn't it? These wise and compassionate beings recognizing the ripple effect of these seemingly simple guidelines.
It's not about being morally superior or anything like that.
No, not at all.
It's about understanding that our actions, even little ones, have these far-reaching consequences and that taking responsibility for those actions can really lead to some major benefits.
Yeah, exactly. Like inner peace, for example.
Yeah. Oh, right. The text really emphasizes that, avoiding actions that lead to regret or guilt.
It's like preventing those little wounds, those mental scars that can build up over time from all the times we act in ways that violate our own sense of right and wrong.
Another benefit is that it gives you such a clear conscience, right? You're not constantly second-guessing yourself, agonizing over what's right or wrong.
Exactly. It's like having this reliable internal compass to guide you, freeing up so much mental energy that would otherwise be spent wrestling with those gray areas.
Right. And I'm sure some people are thinking, wait a minute, won't following all these rules make me like super self-righteous? Looking down on others who don't live by the same code?
It's a valid concern for sure. But the text makes it very clear that the point is not to judge others. It's about cultivating inner peace and clarity for yourself.
So you're focused on your own training,
Exactly.
not comparing yourself to others on their path.
Exactly. Everyone's at a different point in their journey, and these precepts are about individual growth, not about judging where others are on their path.
So in essence, these 5 precepts, they're like a moral compass, helping us navigate life in a way that promotes inner peace and ethical conduct.
A great foundation for a more mindful and harmonious way of being in the world.
A solid start to our mental marathon training.
Definitely. But there's more to come.
Oh, absolutely. We've only just begun. Okay, so we've covered the 5 precepts, which are all about setting those ethical guidelines for ourselves. Now, I want to move on to another really cool technique that's highlighted in this text. Sense restraint.
Oh, yeah, that's a good one.
It might sound a bit intense, like sensory deprivation or something, but it's actually quite different.
It is. It's not about shutting down your senses. It's more like, becoming super aware of them and how they're influencing your mind.
Okay, so turning up the volume on our senses instead of tuning them out.
Exactly. It's about paying close attention to what you're experiencing through your senses and, more importantly, why you're drawn to those particular experiences.
So how do we actually do that? How do we put sense restraint into practice?
Well, the text breaks it down into 2 key areas. The first one is really understanding your motivations. So every time you find yourself drawn to something, a sight, a sound, even a thought, ask yourself, why am I paying attention to this? What's the underlying motivation here?
It's like being a detective of your own mind.
Right. And the second area is paying attention to the impact those sensory experiences have on your mental state. Does looking at this image or listening to this music or even dwelling on this thought, does it bring up feelings of joy, peace, agitation? Does it trigger craving or aversion?
So, for example, if I'm endlessly scrolling through social media, I might ask myself, is this actually making me feel good? Mm-hmm. Or is it just fueling a sense of comparison or envy?
Exactly. Or imagine, you walk past a bakery and see this amazing display of cakes and pastries.
Ooh, I love pastries.
So do I. But with sense restraint, you'd pause and notice your reaction. Is it simple appreciation for the beauty of the pastry? Or is there a craving there? A desire to indulge, even if it might not be the healthiest choice?
I see. It's about becoming aware of those subtle impulses that are driving our actions.
Yeah. And often those impulses are operating beneath the surface. We're not even consciously aware of them until we start paying attention.
So once we start to recognize those patterns, those habitual reactions to sensory input, what do we do?
Well, that's when we can start to shift our attention. If we notice that a particular sensory experience is leading us down a path of, let's say, unskillful thoughts or emotions, we can actively choose to redirect our focus.
It's like we have the power to change the channel in our minds.
Exactly. And the text offers some really cool techniques for doing this. If you're drawn to something that is ultimately harmful or unhelpful, you might try shifting your attention to its less appealing aspects.
I remember reading a passage about countering lustful thoughts by contemplating, the impermanence of beauty. How everything eventually decays and fades.
It's a powerful technique. It helps to break the illusion of permanence and perfection that often fuels those kinds of desires.
So it's about taking a step back and seeing things in a more realistic light.
Right. And the text also talks about actively cultivating more wholesome perspectives. Instead of dwelling on someone's flaws, you might choose to focus on their good qualities.
It's like choosing to focus on the positive aspects of a situation instead of getting bogged down in the negative.
Yeah. I do this all the time. Just the other day, I was feeling really annoyed with a coworker. They were just being super unhelpful. But instead of letting that frustration take over, I made an effort to remember some of their positive qualities.
And did that help?
It did, actually. It just shifted my perspective a little bit and helped me to not take it so personally.
It's amazing how much power we have over our own minds when we actually start paying attention.
It's true. This practice of sense restraint really is like building a mental muscle. A
muscle that helps us become less reactive and more resilient in the face of all the sensory input that bombards us every day.
I like that. A mental muscle.
Yeah.
And just like any other muscle, the more we exercise it, the stronger it becomes.
So even small moments of mindfulness throughout the day can make a big difference over time.
Absolutely. It all adds up.
That's encouraging.
And what's really cool? The text connects these practices of sense restraint back to the 5 precepts we talked about earlier.
Oh, how so?
Well, it suggests that both are essential training techniques for developing the focus and clarity that are needed for, deeper meditative practice.
So it's not just about sitting on a meditation cushion and trying to empty your mind.
No, it's about bringing those principles of mindfulness into every aspect of your life.
And the more we practice, the better we get at it.
Exactly. And just like training for a marathon, it's about building up our endurance and resilience with each step.
And celebrating those small victories along the way.
Yes, exactly. Even those little moments of awareness are worth acknowledging.
It's really striking me that these practices, the 5 precepts and sense restraint, they seem so simple on the surface.
Yeah.
But they can be such powerful tools for, like personal growth and transformation.
They really can. The text even suggests that embracing these principles can actually boost your creativity.
Yep.
Like it can help you become a better problem solver.
Oh, that's interesting. How so?
Well, let's take the precept of no lying, for example. It encourages us to be truthful in all our interactions. But sometimes, being completely honest can lead to unintended consequences.
Right.
It can cause harm or conflict.
Right. So it's not just about blurting out whatever pops into your head.
Exactly. There's a nuance to it. And that's where the creativity comes in. It's how can you communicate honestly and authentically while also being mindful of the impact your words are going to have?
That's like a delicate balancing act.
Yeah, it is. It's like a puzzle, that requires both compassion and cleverness to solve.
So it's not just about rigidly adhering to the rules. It's about finding skillful and compassionate ways to navigate those tricky situations.
Exactly. And the same principle applies to the other precepts too. Let's say the precept of no killing. Imagine you have a garden, right? And it's being overrun by pests.
Ugh, I hate pests.
Me too. But a strict interpretation of that precept might suggest that you just, let them be. But with a little creative thinking, you can come up with solutions that protect your garden without, resorting to harming those creatures.
Right. Like finding natural pest repellents or something.
Exactly. So it's about finding that middle path, that balance between upholding the principle and also being practical.
And using your ingenuity.
Yeah. And that's what I love about these precepts. They really challenge us to think outside the box, to come up with innovative solutions that are actually in alignment with our values.
So as we're wrapping up this deep dive, I think it's clear that the 5 precepts in sense restraint, they're not just some abstract philosophical concept.
No, not at all.
They're practical tools that we can use to cultivate a more mindful, a more ethical, and as we've discovered, a more creative approach to life.
Absolutely. And it's important to remember that it's a journey, right? It's not like you just flip a switch and you're suddenly, the most mindful, ethical, creative person ever.
Right. It's an ongoing process.
It is. We're all constantly learning and growing and, refining our understanding of these principles and how they apply to our own unique lives.
It's like we're training for that mental marathon, remember? Building our endurance and resilience with each step.
And every moment is an opportunity to practice, right? As you go about your day-to-day, pay attention to your motivations, to what your senses are telling you, and to the choices that you're making.
Yeah.
Even those small acts of mindfulness, they can have a ripple effect. They can lead to greater peace, within yourself and in the world around you.
It's pretty amazing to think that by working on our own inner peace, we're also contributing to a more harmonious world.
It is.
So as we close out this episode, I really encourage you to think about how you can bring these practices into your own life.
Yeah.
What small steps can you take today to strengthen those mental muscles, to move towards a life of greater mindfulness and purpose? Just keep exploring, keep practicing, and remember the journey itself is the reward. Thanks for joining us, everyone.